Tony Juniper, and I'm the chairman at Natural England. And we are very proud today to be presenting our new strategy for the coming years, recovering nature for growth, health and security. And I'm delighted to see that this new strategy is not only of enormous interest to us all at Natural England, but to many of our friends, partners and stakeholders across the country. And I see that we have 500 plus people joining us already, and the number is ticking up as we speak. And so thank you all for being here today and for joining with us in a conversation that I hope will shed some light on the direction of travel that we are planning to take over the coming period. And it wouldn't have eluded most people, I'm sure, tuning into this kind of conversation to notice that we are not where we need to be when it comes to the ambition that we need to reach in protecting and restoring our natural environment in England. Despite many strenuous efforts over many decades, we're still travelling in the wrong direction, which led us to ask some searching questions of Natural England about what we could do better to be able to halt and reverse that decline and to turn it towards recovery. And this inevitably led to some pretty big questions being put in front of us, leading to some pretty big and fundamental conclusions about how we work. And we'll go into some of that today. But broadly speaking, we know that we need to be moving from the site-by-site approach, the species-by-species approach that has characterized much of our work for many, many years. We need to be thinking at a bigger scale, thinking about landscapes, thinking about entire populations of animals and plants, rather than focusing on particular protected features in particular localities. That's clear, and that's one of the shifts that we have in mind. We also know that the scale of what needs to be done is beyond the work that we can do, thereby meaning that it's a clear conclusion that we need to be empowering others and working in even stronger and bigger partnerships as we go forward. So that's a prominent theme in the new strategy. We also reflected on the amount of effort that goes in for not much benefit, and there's a piece of our thinking which is about shifting from process and a lot of activity which doesn't necessarily deliver outcomes, and to be thinking much more quickly about outcomes and to be thinking about the risks that we might wish to entertain in being able to focus more at that end of the spectrum, thinking about nature's recovery rather than the rules and regulations which we often need to work through, often with not much benefit resulting. We then have reflected on the question of overall system health, and we know that what goes on in a protected site isn't necessarily going to achieve the outcomes we need without looking at wider, sometimes distant effects being caused by air and water pollution, which are leading to continuing decline and which we need to get our arms around beyond the boundaries of protected sites. And then we also reflected on how we need to be prioritizing our effort, because we can't do everything everywhere, and to be thinking about how we can really focus down into those places where we can create the biggest impact. So this is not something that we've invented on our own. We've spoken to more than 200 stakeholders across the country in reaching these conclusions. We've had a great deal of internal process, including with the board of Natural England, and a big thank you from me to everybody who's shared their time and insights and wisdom in bringing us to where we are today. Now, this, of course, is not the end of it. It's the beginning. There'll be a great deal more engagement as we go along, as we refine the ideas and actually arrive at particular activities in the landscape. But today, hopefully, we'll bring people up to speed as to where our thinking has got to. Now, we only have a brief hour today. And what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to hear from our Chief Executive, Marion Spain, who's going to give you more of an overview of the thinking that we're now adopting. And then we're going to be joined by a wonderful panel of friends and fellow travellers, including distinguished broadcaster, anthropologist and archaeologist Marianne Ahota, We're going to be joined by Charlotte Osborne Ford, the Chief Executive at the National Academy of Social Prescribing, Martin Lines, Chief Executive of the Nature Friendly Farming Network, Sam Stafford, Managing Director at the Land Planning and Development Federation, and our Director of Strategy, John Holmes, to hear from them what they think the new strategy may mean. And then we're going to hear in a different conversation from Erin Gianferrara, Head of Nature at Lloyds Banking Group, and Ben Sykes, Vice President at Ørsted, who will be in conversation with our Chief Officer of Strategy at Natural England, Oliver Harmer. And we will conclude with a question and answer session where you can post questions via Slido. And I think probably there's details of that in the chat somewhere. So without further ado, I will hand over to our wonderful Chief Executive, Marion Spain. Marion, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tony, and welcome everybody. Lovely to see 1,000 people are now joining us. Tony's already set out that this is about a big change for us. It's an ambitious strategy, moving beyond protection of nature and getting even further into systemic, large-scale recovery. And the reason we believe that matters so much is because we need nature to be the powerhouse it can be in order for us to support economic growth, improve the nation's health, and give us that security, that environmental resilience in our essential nature services and natural services that we need. And that link we're making through this strategy of the relationship between nature, economic growth, housing delivery, infrastructure, public health, food security, those links need a very different approach by us, bolder partnerships, a more targeted effort, and more streamlined regulation, but also even more mobilisation of partnerships, wider partnerships, and mobilisation of investment across public, private, and third sectors. So we are delighted that many of those partners who are already working with us, some long old friends and some relatively new partners, are with us this afternoon. The strategy is unashamedly about nature and unapologetically about nature. That's our job. We are the nation's, the government's nature body. So it's the one thing that isn't changing is our focus on nature. But what is changing is how we carry out that statutory purpose and how we use our very precious powers and duties that are given to us by government and parliament, because nature's changing and what society needs from nature is changing, and therefore we need to change. It isn't all new. Some of the change is happening already. And I'm going to share a short video with you now to show you some of the things that we and you are already doing together. I hope I'm sharing a short video.
Here in Bradford, we've seen what can be achieved when a diverse, committed community puts their support behind nature recovery.
We need more houses and we also need more nature. And the best way of doing that is by integrating them.
Together we can turn environmental ambition into meaningful collaborative action.
Thank you. You've hopefully by now been able to have a chance to have a look at the strategy, but I'm just going to talk you through the headlines and bring them alive for you in case you haven't. There's 4 big outcomes in our strategy, which are summarised in the strategy title. The first one is about recovering nature. We'll restore natural systems, rivers, wetlands and forests, and we'll also tackle the root causes of nature decline through large-scale recovery. And we need to do that because we need thriving wildlife, resilient ecosystems, and also Natural England and nature has a big part to play in delivering government's commitment to having 30% of our land and seas protected and managed for nature by 2030. The second outcome in the strategy is about building better places. We want to embed nature into homes, into infrastructure, and influence the planning and development system. So we deliver developments that are low carbon, good for society, but also high in nature. We also want to use that power to make sure more businesses are able to invest in nature for their benefit as well as for nature's. That will mean we have greener, healthier, more investable places and developments that are good for those who are going to live and work in them. Our third outcome is an ongoing commitment to the power of nature for health and well-being. We'll be continuing to expand access to green and blue spaces for people who live in urban, rural and coastal communities. We're committed to that government target of people being able to access nature within 15 minutes of their home. And we're also going to carry on and expand our work in health, education and employment so that those bodies can embed nature in the services they offer to children and to adults. All of that leading to improved public health and reducing the inequalities of access to nature that have become so stark in recent years. And finally, we'll deliver security through nature. That's not a word Natural England might have used until relatively recently. And what we mean by security is that nature-based solutions will strengthen our resilience to climate change, flooding, extreme heat, and so on. And it'll also secure our natural resources such as water, air, and soil. The work we do here will include our ongoing support for nature-friendly farming, forestry, and fisheries, meaning that nature continues to help produce the food we need, but also ensures those businesses are secure into the future. So we'll have restored ecosystems that are central to our national resilience and to our climate resilience. So as I've said already, we remain true to our statutory purposes. We continue to be the government's nature conservation body, but we're changing the way we deliver those powers and duties. So we're moving beyond site by site and species by species regulation and moving beyond an approach that has often just involved mitigation into an approach where we also bring compensation and we also bring net gain. So we deliver a much wider range of nature benefits and create lasting improvements. We'll also be changing the way we work with others, enabling and trusting other people to deliver for nature, empowering farmers and landowners to take decisions themselves about how they look after protected sites on their land, working with other wildlife bodies and allowing them to make judgments about what they do with the land that in the past they might have needed our permission for. And also working with developers and infrastructure providers so we can give them the permissions they need once and early so they have certainty to be able to continue a development. We'll also be looking at our own risk appetite and making sure we're focusing on outcomes for nature, not following the processes, or not only following processes. And if those processes need to change, we'll make those changes ourselves, or we'll work with government if this is something that needs political or policy intervention. We're targeting our efforts where we make the biggest difference, focusing on cases that are high risk for nature, but also cases where there's high opportunity for nature. And we'll also be tackling the underlying causes of nature decline, not just looking at the symptoms. So we'll continue the work we've been doing on strategic solutions, such as the nutrient mitigation scheme, to make sure we're investing in reducing pollution, tackling air and water quality, and improving overall environmental health. Because it's that focus on environmental health and resilient ecosystems that will give us the sound platform we need to enable growth to happen. There is a lot of change in there. One of the ways I've been summing up that change in my conversations over the last few weeks is a sentence that's in our strategy at the bottom of the first page, and I'll paraphrase it, but it basically says, in the future, nature may be different, but there'll be more of it it'll be wilder, and it'll be more accessible. And we're open about the fact that this change will lead to a change, an overall improvement in the nature we see around us. So now I've told you a bit about the strategy and what it means to me, I'm going to hand to my colleague, John Holmes, who's going to invite a series of our friends and partners to tell you what they think about it. Thank you, John.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm John Holmes, Strategy Director for Natural England. Really pleased to have on our panel today Marianne Hotter, Sam Stafford, Charlotte Osborne-Ford, and we're hoping to be joined by Martin Lines. He's having trouble getting in. If we're not, we thank him for trying, but we'll press on anyway. So you've heard from Marion that our strategy is organised around 4 outcomes. I'm just going to come to our panel members and ask them to reflect on outcomes that are particularly relevant to them. So, Marianne, welcome. You've written and broadcast on people and their relationship with their environment in many ways. Could you give us some reflections, please, on the need for nature recovery, our first outcome, nature recovery at a scale, and what that could mean for people?
Yeah, hi, John. Thank you for inviting me to speak at the launch event. I think the first thing that struck me about the strategy document is that there aren't many words in it, which I think is probably a good thing. But there are really big ideas and some significant, really seismic, I think, changes in the way that Natural England is going to operate over this next period of years. I think the thing that really stuck out to me was that the central mission is to recover nature rather than protect what we have. So it's not palliative, it's curative, and exactly the point that Marion just made, which is that nature will be more in the future, the future that, you know, we often think about, and we often talk about what our children are going to inherit, but actually, you know, it's for all of us. We should be able to see this in our working lifetimes. I think the other crucial thing that really stands out that feels incredibly exciting is that it's about tackling root cause and integrating nature into every decision and action to effectively mainstream nature in economy, in development, in health, in education, in the round. And I think I'd just like to, if I may, just take the opportunity as well to recognise the work of the staff of Natural England, because the work of the people in your organisation is really hard and it's really important. And many of us are coming to this work looking for win-wins. And it's, of course, right to reject those false binaries in this, you know, era of outrage that we live in, where it's either nature or growth, or it's bats or business. I mean, yes, absolutely reject that. But I think it's foolish, it's naive to suggest that actually holding space and navigating tensions between conflicting and complex priorities isn't difficult work. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to publicly acknowledge the work that Natural England and all the staff who show up every day to do the hard and dirty work. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much. Well, there's one staff member here sitting here who's going to say thank you for saying that. And I know I say that on behalf of all of our staff. Thanks so much. Sam, Managing Director from the Land Planning and Development Federation, our second outcome is about building better places. How can we build nature into development better and build those places that are healthy and great to live in?
Hi, John. Thank you. Yeah, more houses and more nature was mentioned in the video. Yeah, that sounds good to me. And our members, just for anybody who hasn't come across the LPDF, we act for 190 or so organisations, primarily those involved in promoting land through the planning system. So basically trying to get a local plan allocation and then trying to secure planning permission. So that's our members' interface with Natural England through the planning process. So in that context, the most significant line for me and my members in the strategy is that about moving away from isolated interventions and moving towards interventions at scale. And Tony talked about not doing everything everywhere. And if I can kind of put that into kind of the practical benefits of doing that, Ideally through the local plan and emerging spatial development strategies, you are setting out the outcomes at that kind of greater than local scale. And here's the role for local nature recovery strategies. And by doing that, you're then not having to intervene at every single planning application. So let's think of it in the context of biodiversity net gain. You're creating a solution that allows for biodiversity that might mean some credits for an improvement to a watercourse over there to facilitate the development of that site over there. In the context of nutrient neutrality, for example, you're taking out a pig farm over here to enable some development over here. It's kind of unilateral. Now, if you think about the resource and the cost of doing that, and then scaling that up at a kind of catchment-wide level in the neutrality space, the outcome per pound of the cost of doing that can be considerably more, and it can be considerably better coordinated. And in so doing, there is less need for granular focus of Natural England staff in individual planning applications because the principles have been established upstream. Planning can get very technical very, very quickly, but hopefully that kind of makes sense. And that in practical terms is how you get more houses and more nature, but most importantly for our members and for your staff, it's shorter planning application timeframes and the less need for more direct intervention in individual planning applications. So that's what me and my members see that would like to be working with you all towards.
Thanks, Sam. I recognise in what you've said, some of the solutions that we've started working on, some that are getting there and in place, but you're welcoming our ambition to really scale that up and make that work everywhere, really, for the nation. Thanks so much for that. Charlotte, hello. Thanks so much for joining us. CEO of the National Academy for Social Prescribing. I mean, hopefully people understand that social prescribing can be good and really effective for people's well-being, but where do you see nature sitting in that?
Hi everybody, and thanks for including me today. This strategy is actually really important for our sector, and just as we have a nature crisis, we know England, like many countries, we're facing a growing health crisis. We've got significant increases in poor mental health and in health inequalities. And we know that the NHS alone can't and doesn't have all the answers. And what social prescribing means is it means looking at the root causes of someone's ill health and helping them to access support in the community to improve their health and well-being. And we have incredibly robust evidence, not just from here in England, but around the world, that connection to nature, it's not just therapeutic, it's actually essential for good health. Yet many people either aren't aware of the importance of nature or they simply can't access it for both practical and psychological reasons. And green social prescribing, it means helping people to access and connect to nature as part of their healthcare through new pathways, hands-on support from a link worker, and more accessible nature-based social and community activities. So everything from nature walks to group gardening, conservation. It's incredibly effective, and we've had a large-scale government-funded programme evaluation showing not only does it reach people that are most impacted by inequalities, it improves well-being, it increases happiness, it reduces anxiety and depression, and it's also very cost-effective. So we must make green social prescribing much more widely available and help more people to realise the benefits of nature for their health. And that's why I really welcome the strategy, because it includes a particular commitment to help work with us and others to embed green social prescribing in public health policy. That's really encouraging. And to continue to work together to raise the profile of nature for health and to embed it properly in our healthcare system.
Thanks so much. Had Martin been here, we'd go on to security, and Martin would have talked with authority about well, far more than I can about farming security. Marion mentioned some things about clean water, clean air. We may, if we have time at the end as a panel, come back and share some thoughts about what security might mean to us. But my very simple sort of version of it is, what do I worry about as a member of the community, as a dad, and about someone who thinks about the future. And I came into this line of work. I've worked for many years as what I would think of as a nature conservationist in public service, and I came in as a bird watcher, a specialist, and you're worrying about what was happening to the birds. I probably spend more time worrying about earthworms now than I do about birds. I love watching the birds, but I worry about earthworms, what's happened to our soil. Add that to all the layers above and beyond the water and the air, what systems are going to support all of the nation's outcomes, let alone the ones that have been dearest to my hearts over the years. That's a little trailer for my panel that we might speak about security in a little while. But first, I'm going to come back to another question and come around to everyone again. This one's thinking a bit ahead about what if this goes really well for us, which is what we want to make happen. What excites you most about what you've heard today about our strategy, and what would success look like for you in 5 years' time? Mary-Anne.
Just to pick up on that idea about thinking about worms, I think about dung beetles these days as well, very similar. I think the kind of guiding principle for me, John, is the idea that the economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of nature, and that kind of frames everything. But what excites me about the strategy, about this kind of new approach, is that there's this opportunity, a kind of a stated aim, I guess, to reformulate the relationships that Natural England wants to have and is going to have within the kind of environment sector in a kind of narrow way, but across society and business as well. And I think that's really crucial, and it picks up on what Sam and Charlotte were saying as well, that the kind of the way of working will mean that both trusted partners and actual staff members are empowered to get on with the work rather than kind of check back and try and navigate labyrinthine, texts of document. And it's going to, if it's successful, which I hope it will be, make it easier for good things to happen and harder for bad things to happen, which means that you can target that kind of strong regulation, prevention of harm, remediation, holding to account. Now, of course, with that kind of increased risk appetite comes a degree of nervousness, because if you're experimenting, some experiments fail, there are going to be unintended consequences. Often with nature restoration, we're looking at kind of multi-generational impacts, and actually in 100 years' time, people are going to do the balance sheet and go, oh, well, that worked and that bit definitely didn't. And of course, we live in quite socially and politically volatile times. So it's a hard environment. It's a hard kind of emotional landscape to feel safe whilst experimenting and saying, this might not go to plan, folks, strap in. But I think fundamentally, it's what Tony started the call with, to say, well, we can't carry on doing what we're doing because it's not working. So we need to do something different, and we need to do it with ambition, and we need to do it with confidence. So for me, as hopefully a critical friend of Natural England, I think what's important for us broadly is that we approach our relationships with Natural England with rigour, absolutely, criticism if necessary, but fundamentally built on a foundation of shared endeavour. And I think that's the kind of the guiding star for me.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. And yeah, absolutely agree with what you said there. Thanks so much. And Sam, similar question to you. What really excites you? And in 5 years' time, how will we know we've done it?
Well, I'm a planner, John, as you know, so everything comes back to planning for me. And what is planning in the widest sense is anticipating future problems and dealing with them now. But in an intellectual kind of space, it's the mediation of land use interests in the public interest. So my members want to build houses, you want to restore nature, other people want to build pylons and create solar farms, and there's an inordinate amount of pressure on land to be used for different things, and those pressures need mediating at a greater than local scale. And we haven't had since 2010. bore the viewers too much, but we haven't had since 2010 a platform on which to have conversations about using land at a greater than local scale, and those spatial development strategies that the government is seeking to reintroduce is an opportunity to do that. And I mentioned the local nature recovery strategies as being, you know, important in working alongside those documents. Now, in 5 years' time, or if what we were talking about now was in place 5 years ago, would we be in a better position now than we are? And I think you know, and we have to say that we would be. So let's look for this strategy and this new approach to resolve the issues that we have got now, like nutrient neutrality, like improving BNG. I don't want to go off on a tangent in talking about part 3 of the bill and all of that kind of thing. But you know, if environmental delivery plans are not the answer to nutrient neutrality, that, you know, what is? If the Nature Restoration Fund isn't the mechanism to get more bang for the BNG credit, nutrient neutrality credit book, you know, then what is? They are good ideas that the industry supports. So if in 5 years' time those mechanisms, SDSs are maturing as a concept, local nature recovery strategies are maturing as a concept, Nature Restoration Fund is up and running, we will be, let's give these ideas time, they have merit, let's make them work, and if they all do, we will be in a better position in 5 years' time than we are now, you know, through the twin prisms of more homes and more nature.
Thanks so much, and you've name checked several mechanisms there that Natural England has been at the sort of heart of promoting, trialing, and being willing to adopt, not without some sort of risk in that. But the way you bring them together there, I think, is especially important, and the link to the local nature recovery strategies. Thank you. And Charlotte, the same question to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think what's really exciting is the strategic and systematic approach here. We know we need to move from individual projects and silos to a genuinely systematic approach, because if we pool the skills and expertise, the organisational capacity and funding to really collaborate across sectors and to work together, then we've got a much better chance of taking forward these impactful and innovative solutions like green social prescribing. And we've got to do much more to recognise that nature and health are completely intertwined. So we can only have good health if we recognise our deep connection to and our need for nature. And we'll only move to a world where people of all backgrounds really value nature if they have experienced it for themselves and if they've actually felt the difference it makes to them. And what we find is they then become advocates and they want to champion nature, they want to protect nature. So what would success look like in 5 years' time? Well, we are very ambitious. And at NASP, we think that everybody with a health condition should be offered social prescribing alongside medical care. And we're a really long way away from that. And by that, we mean the opportunity to work with a health professional to co-produce a prescription for community support that would, of course, include nature, but as well creative, social and practical help. And we want to see a parity of esteem between all evidence-based solutions. And nature-based and green social prescribing is incredibly evidence-based. It's robust. We want parity of esteem between those sorts of interventions and clinical interventions. And with that parity of esteem, equity of investment, there must be much greater funding going into community-based social, neighbourhood, green conservation interventions. And if something is scientifically proven to be effective, if it's inclusive and low cost, like many green social prescribing interventions, they've got to be systematically and widely available like any other treatment. And I think the inclusion and commitment in the strategy is a good step forward for this ambition. It is a really big ambition, but hopefully today is another step towards that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. I won't even begin to try and sum up what you've all said. My first reaction, having been close to developing this strategy and leading it, is phew. I think what you've said is we're on the right track. So that's fantastic. Thank you. A couple of things just really struck me in that, you know, we've worked really hard on what are the right words to get this across or that across. And Mary-Anne, you found two that we haven't used, but it really struck me: seismic and curative. as you said them, I thought, yeah, that's exactly what we're aiming for. And I think the thanks you gave to our staff, thank you for that. I think Sam and Charlotte, you gave a thank you and push on to our staff in different ways. Your comments about scaling up, Sam, and joining at a strategic level what we do to enable housing, landed really well with me. I can absolutely get how you could recognise what we're aiming at in the strategy. And Charlotte, your root causes, the synergy with what we're trying to do with the strategy there, root causes and then holistic approaches, absolutely resonated with us, and I'm sure we'll do with everybody else. You're going to be able, I hope, to stay with us until the end when we'll have some questions. Some may come to you, some may not. I'm sorry we didn't have Martin on the call. He may be watching. Thanks for trying if you're watching, Martin. But as we don't have Martin and we didn't cover the security one quite as much as we would, we may have many people on the call. You could use Slido to post any thoughts about security, perhaps farming, especially if you want to post those, but any thoughts about security in the Slido. Thanks for that, everybody. I'm going to hand over now to Oliver Harmer for the next session.
John, thank you very much, and thanks Mary, Sam and Charlotte as well. So I'm Oliver Harmer, Natural England's Chief Strategy Officer, and it's fair to say, given my job title, this is a super proud day. But can I also, just before I get into it, say a big thank you to all Natural England staff, but also all the partners, so many of you on the line, plus many that can't make it today, who've provided input all the way along the road to get to this point. So I'm proud of it, but it's been a massive team effort. But of course, the hard yards start now in many respects. This is quite a change. And I just want to spend a couple of minutes with both Benj and Erin, who will just introduce in a second, to talk about how do we make this happen? What are the big changes that this signals, and what does that really begin to look like? And I say that because Natural England cannot do this alone. It's obvious, isn't it? Collaboration and partnership is absolutely fundamental to everything we're saying in here. So I'm joined by Erin Jan Ferrara, who is head of nature at Lloyds Banking Group, Ben Sykes, who is Vice President at Ørsted, a major offshore wind developer, both, of course, incredibly important partners to us. Erin, shall I come to you first? Because what we haven't talked about so far is the money. And of course, we need a blend of public and private finance to really invest and achieve everything we're saying here. The term green finance is widely used, isn't it? Just a first question about what do you see that meaning in your role in the context of nature recovery?
Thank you, Oliver. It's really great to be here with you all today. I think, as we're all aware, there's a growing recognition that if ecosystems fail, so do supply chains, so do property values, and ultimately so do financial and economic systems. And so in recognition of that, there's been increased global momentum within what has been termed green finance. So globally, we use taxonomies to define what counts as green finance. And it's these definitions that enable banks, governments, investors, and corporates to align their financing with environmental goals such as nature's recovery. At Lloyds, it's our sustainable financing framework that sets the clear criteria for what qualifies as green finance for us. And this includes sustainable agriculture and fisheries, sustainable forestry, and nature-based solutions, including conservation, restoration, and protection of ecosystems and biodiversity. Generally, most large financial institutions and corporates will have similar frameworks that set out their definition for green finance as well. And many will also have targets associated with their green finance activities. So, and many publish these targets broken down by sector or activity. So for nature recovery, that means that Natural England and other organizations doing the work on the ground can see what types of activities financial institutions and corporates are able to finance, and also the size of their ambition to move capital into different types of eligible activities, and ultimately look to access and leverage that finance. But beyond just how green finance is defined, we also need to recognize that there is a different amount of ability to support amongst different actors. So in general, for investors, they might be able to move more quickly with higher risk appetite for projects that are more nascent or innovative, but of course have return expectations that can also vary widely from investor to investor. For banks, we might not be able to move as quickly or with the same risk appetite of other actors, but we are well placed to develop financial products that enable our clients to transition business practices away from ones that impact and degrade nature to those that restore and regenerate it. All of these components are constantly evolving, and that's why collaboration with Natural England and other organizations is critical. We need science-based criteria to ensure the robustness and integrity of these activities and financial flows as they increase and mature. And we need to know how to define what good looks like so that capital can move confidently into projects that demonstrate the right outcomes at the speed that we need them to as well.
Erin, that's super clear, and I'm filled with hope listening to you. I'm going to just pick up on your words about accessing and leveraging finance and come to Benj, because, Benj, certainly historically and perhaps today in some parts, nature's still seen as a cost. And just interested in your views on how we can help see nature as an investment opportunity. So I'll put that to you.
Sure. Sure, and thank you again for the opportunity to speak. And I firstly would like to just welcome the new strategy, and I'm sure I'll be picking up some of Tony's comments around partnerships, and even more importantly about outcomes, because I think that's where we really want to focus. But to your question about how do you turn this into a financeable solution rather than a cost, I think in Orsted we're kind of already doing it. Firstly, we're financing a lot of our work with green bonds, and now also with blue bonds. Since we're offshore, of course, we're able to do that. And I think that is testament to the fact that we're able to bring finance in for these nature-based solutions that we're delivering. We have a particular view in Orsted that we can't separate the climate and biodiversity crises. So we've made big commitments that we're going to work to deliver nature positive, biodiversity net positive outcomes on our projects. And that really is investing in nature. We're currently building quite a big project out in the North Sea, Hornsey Project 3. That's about £8.5 billion of investment we're making. And along with that, we're supporting nature recovery through some of the investments we're making with those bonds. I would particularly point to the Wilder Humber project. Some of you on this call may know that project. If not, please do go and Google it. We're very proud of it and excited what that's achieving in the Humber estuary in terms of a system-wide recovery program. But we're looking at all of the different tools that we can invest in order to deliver those positive nature outcomes. So I think it is already becoming investable. To Erin's point, we need to be really solid on how we do that so that it doesn't get gamed. There will be those who will try and game the system. But with science-based targets and all the other structures that are being put in place, I think investing in nature is very much at the heart of what the energy transition can do, but also the other sectors that have been talked about earlier. We definitely don't see it as a cost. We see it as part of what we invest in.
And that's brilliant, Benj. And I'm going to leap on in terms of what you've hinted at already, because you talked about the importance of climate as well as nature. And obviously, we've got crises in both. So we're looking for win-win opportunities. And Erin, if I come to you first, what do you think Natural England can do? And then what can the wider sector do to make sure we're tackling both at the same time?
A great question. And as Benj mentioned, thankfully, climate and nature are so intertwined that many of the solutions for one also result in benefits to the other. As long as we are deliberately recognizing how they relate to each other within our decision-making and strategies, there's a lot that we can do to uncover those. As an example, a clear win-win that we've been seeing at Lloyd's and done a lot of work a lot of work around is helping our farmers to transition to regenerative practices. So we're the UK's largest agricultural lender and have been supporting farmers to adopt regenerative practices that improve soil health, cut emissions, and enable the soil to sequester more carbon, as well as boosting biodiversity. They are also a win for Lloyd's because they help us in terms of ensuring our farmers are more profitable, resilient, and able to stay in business. One clear link to Natural England that we've also found through this work is that many of our farmers, a significant proportion of them, operate within or adjacent to protected areas and designated sites. And so we really need partnership with you all to understand how we can work with our farmers to better kind of help deliver outcomes that you all are looking for in the way that you manage and maintain and indeed set ambitions around our designated sites.
Lovely. It's about joining up, isn't it? Thank you, Erin. And if I put the same question to you, Benj, because you might give a slightly different take from the marine perspective.
In terms of how do we find those win-wins for climate
absolutely.
and nature? So I think as an industry, we're very focused on obviously climate. That's what we're all about with clean power, but also finding nature-based solutions. And it's not just Ørsted that's doing this. So I think it is this partnering with the Natural England team. We're already seeing some great examples of that. We've done some great work on one of our projects, working with Natural England and others around the ornithological solutions that we need to put in place. And that's been really effective. And I think, we talk about a big strategic shift, and this is not just a slight recalibration. This is a big change, I think, for how Natural England sees the world. And I think the win-wins will come for climate and nature when we build those partnerships more strongly. And that isn't just around projects, it's also more strategically around things like the Marine Recovery Fund, around HRA reform, marine net gain. I think these are all areas where we can work together to deliver wins for both climate and nature, because we absolutely, as an industry, and certainly as Ørsted, we have no desire to shortcut the environmental protections that are correctly in place through the laws of this country. What we want to do is smart cut them, if you like. We want to be able to move faster and smarter, focusing on the things that will really make a difference, and not getting hung up on the things that won't. And we've all been guilty of that. And I think this shift to looking at outcomes will help all of us do that. And hopefully that means we can move faster to solutions that are enabling that energy transition to take place as quickly as possible, but also delivering the positive nature outcomes so we can start to restore the health of what's frankly a pretty parlous state for both the North Sea and the Irish Sea, actually through decades and centuries of human use and perhaps abuse.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Some big challenges, but big opportunities as well. And perhaps just staying with that, because you started to talk about how we look at things strategically at a bigger scale, and perhaps change our risk appetite, which again is a central kind of theme in our strategy. Erin, just any reflections from a Lloyd's perspective on what you'd like to see Natural England do differently, or perhaps how we work in partnership differently going forwards?
Yeah, sure. So one area that springs to mind is around integrating nature and climate into decision-making frameworks and financial risk models. So nature loss and climate change are interconnected systemic risks, and we need to become much more strategic about making sure that both are represented in how we make decisions, but that they're also priced accurately within our financial systems. So we would look to Natural England to help and partner with us to provide science-backed and data-driven insights to guide where activities and finance can deliver the greatest combined impact for climate and nature.
Thank you, Erin. And is there anything you'd like to say, just expanding on things like Marine Recovery Fund, Benj? We talked a little bit about Nature Restoration Fund on land earlier. I mean, this is potentially a game changer for the seas. But what can Natural England do to help facilitate that process?
So yeah, I was going to talk actually about the Marine Recovery Fund, and I think the terrestrial version is somewhat followed along behind the early development of the MRF. So I think it is about partnering. It's about pooling resources to direct investment. Now it's going to be delivered by DEFRA, but I think we all need to play a role in finding the smart investment opportunities, that because MRF is going to be ultimately very well funded. What we need to do is, I think, work together between developers, Natural England, but also the environmental NGOs and others, all the stakeholders who have skin in the game here, to figure out what is the smartest way to direct those funds. And I think it is a mindset shift here, which is about perhaps moving from us on one side of the table and regulators and SNCBs on the other. We're all sat on one side of the table, and on the other side is the challenge of restoring nature. And let's see this as something where we sit together to tackle that challenge. I honestly believe we can make a big difference. I would just add one little challenge in for all of us, and I think, to coin the phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think we're all going to have to work really hard to turn what is a fantastic strategy into something that actually lives and breathes in the day-to-day interactions that we have with many of the people on this call, I'm sure, and many others besides. So we really have to work towards finding how that shift happens and all committing to make it happen.
Benj, Erin, thank you so much. I would love to talk for longer, but we're up against time. I hope that's been useful and helpful to the audience. I think my takeaway is 5 years ago, I don't think we would have had this kind of conversation at the launch of previous strategies. Actually, the world of green finance, climate change, it's testing all of us, and we need new partnerships, new relationships. We need culturally to think in different ways, Benj, to pick up your point at the end. And we need to integrate, expertise across different sectors. So thank you so much. We are now going to move forward into the last session, and we are going to take some questions. So I hope I'm going to be joined on the screen by several colleagues. Thank you for putting questions into Slido. We are going to start, and I can't quite juggle Slido with doing this live. So we're going to start with a question. I'm going to come to you, Tony, which I think is all about our new strategic approach and how we ensure that we achieve nature recovery, but we also uphold the value of what I describe as the rare and special, be it sites, species, ancient woodlands. So thank you to whoever asked that question. But Tony, can I come to you? And if we can try and give brief answers, we'll try and get through a few questions.
Thank you, Oliver. I think the first thing to do is just to highlight the difference between conservation and recovery. So there will be no diminishing of the protections that are afforded to critically important habitats and species, whether they be sites of special scientific interest or whether they be SACs or indeed irreplaceable habitats like ancient woodlands. We have to continue to safeguard those. But if we're interested in recovery, we need to start thinking beyond those individual sites and think about landscapes. And for example, how a housing development in proximity to an area of ancient woodland might be harnessed to bring in more woodland that's targeted to joining up the fragments of ancient woodland that remain, so that in the future those small pieces of habitat can be reunited and connected and thereby made more resilient to the effects of climate change. So this is not about abandoning protections or diminishing the importance of particular sites that are deemed of conservation concern, but it's about putting them into a bigger context whereby they can be nurtured for the future, recognizing that nothing is static, and that one of the big things that we have to face into now is the effects of ecological fragmentation at a time of climate change. So as we're safeguarding the last remnants, we have to be thinking about the future and how to reconnect them at large scale, I think is the way I would open that conversation.
Tony, thank you. Marion, is there anything you wanted to add around getting the balance right between protecting what we've got and adapting and building environmental resilience? Because you certainly hinted at it earlier.
Yes. And I'm trying, Oliver, not to say either it's a bit of both or it depends, but it might do, because as we work through the strategy, we will be applying judgments. We won't necessarily be applying a blanket choice. But as Tony has just said, neither is this a blanket choice between a binary choice between protection or restoration. It's about both. One of my colleagues uses a phrase I've stolen from him that I think sums it up quite nicely. And he says that the protected sites that we have now, our SSSIs, our nature reserves, our national parks, they're the start of the conversation, not the end of it. So the job is not just to look after those sites. The job is to keep those sites resilient, as the questioner puts it, resilient to the changes that we're facing from climate change, from pollution, from all sorts of other things, keeping them resilient so they continue to give us the functions we need. And sometimes that need will be about protecting a very precious and a very rare species that's part of our natural culture. Sometimes that function will be about flood resilience and keeping clean air and water. So I think we'll be looking across that spectrum of tools and working on a area by area based basis, or even a site by site. I think others have also mentioned already the importance of that kind of strategic approach, and things like the local nature recovery strategies will help us get those judgments right, because they will give us that view of what that community wants from nature where it lives.
Marion, thank you. And we're joined by Alan Law, our Chief Operations Officer. And I'm going to make a seamless link to what you just mentioned, because you've just mentioned local nature recovery strategies. We have a question in the chat, which I know is dear to both Alan and myself, all about, are there tensions around what you're trying to achieve everywhere versus how we ensure that we've got a regional and equitable approach, and we are prepared to make tough decisions perhaps in some parts of the country. Alan, do you want to take that one for us?
Yes, happily, and good afternoon, everyone. And I think the question goes on to say, how do we ensure that we don't shy away from those decisions in areas like the southeast when this is needed? And I'm going to start out in part by challenging that premise. So if you look at the southeast of England now, you've got the area with the highest population, the area with the highest economic activity, the area with the highest biological diversity, the area with the highest area of protected landscapes, the area with the highest ancient woodland coverage. You've got people, economy, and nature together all in one place in a high concentration, and that's not there by accident. And I think what we see in an area like the southeast is a demonstration that actually these things can operate side by side, they can go together, and actually the opportunities for them to go together arguably are greater in the southeast than in some of the other areas. Now, as Oliver was describing, local nature recovery strategies, or in the future, subnational regional spatial strategies of some description, I think what they will provide is a framework to plan how we both identify where and how development should take place, but also how we plan to invest in nature and make nature infrastructure healthier and more resilient. The thing we must avoid doing is taking hits on nature in those areas where there are high cost and exporting them to other parts of the country where they are low cost, because all you'll be doing is denuding areas and denuding communities of what they need. But a view of nature as infrastructure, something that's needed for people and for economy, and a strategic planning framework to cater for that is exactly what we need to avoid that. Oliver.
Alan, thank you. And I'm going to come as a last question, I think, to Marion and John, so if you can be brief. There's a question around what do we mean by moving beyond species by species regulation, and how that sits with landscape scale nature recovery. Marion, do you want to just give a brief answer to that one?
I think I perhaps partly answered it in my previous answer, Oliver, so I will be saying we aren't moving away from looking after species. We're looking at the right approach for those species. So we still have our species recovery programme, and we also still have an obligation to meet government's own target about preventing species loss. But I think what I meant by is it's a different approach than looking after every single individual. If I may dare to quote Tony, the sort of no newt must ever be affected policy has not necessarily served us well. We need to look to build resilient populations of those rare species. I'm going to be really cheeky, Oliver, and clock another question. There's another really important question for somebody from one of our partners asking how small charities, in this case dealing with mental health engagers with Natural England. And I think that's a very valuable question. We aren't the type of organisation that can work with every individual smaller charity, but through our partners, and I see Charlotte's popped up on screen, I think that's the way we'd want to work with you. But whoever asks that question will be in touch.
Thank you. Charlotte, is there anything you just very briefly want to add to that question?
Yes, a quick pitch for our jointly run between Natural England and NASP Green Social Prescribing Network, which has been launched just 3 months ago for exactly these sorts of organisations. You can access support, advice, and connect with us both. So hopefully we can send out some information on that after the event.
Charlotte, sounds amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you to my fellow panelists. And I'm going to pass to Marion Spain to close the call at this point.
And I will be very brief because we are bang on time. A huge thank you to all of our speakers and all of the comments in Slido. If we haven't answered them today, they have been noted and we'll follow up in various ways. I heard 3 big things from today's call. The first one is we need to make this smarter, faster, simpler for all of our customers. We heard that very loud. We also heard very loud, we need to make good things happen, not just stop bad things. And that will be difficult and sometimes we will fail. I think we're prepared for that, but we'll look for you to help us keep us on the straight and narrow. And I also heard, I don't know if anybody said the word crisis, but if they didn't, the reason I wrote it down because I haven't, I think that faster word is going to be really important for us. We're in a nature crisis, we're in a climate crisis, we're in a health crisis, and this strategy is signalling that we have to find the fastest, simplest, most impactful ways to deal with all 3 of those. Thank you, everybody. I will call us to an end because we are bang on 3 o'clock. Wonderful that you all joined us. Keep in touch.